Ever imagine being so wealthy that your fortune like equals almost 3% of like the entire U.S. economy?
Wow.
That's John D. Rockefeller
Yeah.
in the early 1900s. And
Oh,
today we're going deep
okay.
into the life of this incredibly complex figure.
Right.
From his humble beginnings to the controversial oil empire.
Sure.
He built Standard Oil.
It's a fascinating journey, and what's striking is that his path wasn't paved with privilege.
Okay.
Born in 1839 in upstate New York,
Right.
his family moved constantly,
Right.
and his father, William Rockefeller Sr.,
Okay.
was a traveling salesman selling elixirs.
Sounds a little like a snake oil salesman, right?
More than a little.
Wow.
William was also known as a bit of a con man
Really?
with a reputation for shady deals.
Oh my gosh.
He even bigamously married another woman
Good.
and brought her home to live with his wife and children,
Oh.
including John.
Wow. Talk about a chaotic childhood.
Yeah.
How did that affect young John?
Imagine growing up in that kind of environment.
Right.
His father was often absent,
Yeah.
leaving John's mother Eliza to raise the family,
Yeah.
often struggling financially.
It seems like that would either break a person
It could.
or make them incredibly resilient.
It certainly shaped John.
Yeah.
He learned to be resourceful and started working at a young age,
Okay.
raising turkeys and selling candy to neighbors.
Wow.
His mother instilled in him a strong work ethic
Ah.
and a sense of frugality.
Right.
She had a saying,
Oh, really?
willful waste makes woeful want.
I like that.
Those early experiences definitely played a part in his future success.
It's amazing how those seemingly small details from childhood can have such a big impact.
Yeah.
So despite this turbulent home life,
Right.
he did manage to get some schooling in Cleveland
He did.
after the family moved there in 1854.
But he left school at 16 to find work.
Okay.
He was ambitious and set his sights high,
Wow.
even approaching major businesses like banks and railroad companies.
That takes guts, a 16-year-old going after jobs like that.
He faced a lot of rejection
Oh, no.
for weeks, but he didn't give up. Finally, he landed a position as an assistant bookkeeper
Okay.
at Hewitt and Tuttle,
Good.
a produce commission firm.
Got it.
And this is where things get interesting.
So he gets his foot in the door.
Yeah.
What happens next?
He was a natural.
Okay.
He was fascinated by the intricacies of the business, meticulous in his work, and quickly became skilled at understanding transportation costs and negotiating deals.
Those early lessons from his mother about frugality and hard work must have really paid off.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He learned the ropes, proved himself indispensable to his employers.
Right.
And then at just 18, he partnered with Maurice B. Clark,
Okay.
a fellow businessman,
Okay.
to form their own produce commission firm,
Oh, wow.
Clark and Rockefeller.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
Barely an adult, and he's already running his own business.
I know, it's pretty amazing.
What were they selling?
They dealt in hay green meat,
Okay.
anything a growing city needed,
Got it.
just like at his first job.
Yeah.
John was a master at managing finances,
Okay.
securing loans, and projecting an image of financial strength,
Right.
even if the reality wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah.
That perception of success was key to attracting more business.
That's clever. Creating an aura of success to actually become successful.
He understood that perception is often reality in business.
Yeah.
They recorded impressive sales in their first year.
Wow.
And keep in mind, he was still just a teenager at this point.
That's unbelievable.
I know.
Then comes the American Civil War.
Uh-huh.
Did John fight in the war?
He was a staunch abolitionist and supported the Union.
Okay.
However, instead of enlisting, he paid for a substitute.
That was an option back then.
It was for some.
Wow.
This decision was controversial.
Yeah, I bet.
But it highlights John's pragmatism.
Right.
He was focused on building his business and providing for his family, and saw more opportunity in staying the course.
Got it.
Now, with the war raging, another event occurred that would change John's life forever.
Okay.
The discovery of oil in Pennsylvania in 1859.
This is where the oil empire begins.
This is it.
Did he rush out to drill for oil like everyone else?
John was much more calculated than that.
Oh, really?
He saw that the real money wasn't in drilling,
Okay.
but in refining oil,
Refining her.
turning crude oil into kerosene.
Okay.
It was a booming market, with kerosene replacing expensive whale oil for lighting.
So instead of gambling on striking it rich, he focused on the sure bet, the value-added product?
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
He partnered with a chemist, Samuel Andrews,
Okay.
and in 1863,
Uh-huh.
They built an oil refinery in Cleveland.
Okay.
He saw the long-term potential of oil
Right.
and strategically chose Cleveland,
Okay.
a hub connecting the Pennsylvania oil fields with rail lines.
Ah, I see.
Plus, he and his partners were experts at raising capital and building infrastructure. He wasn't just lucky, he was positioned perfectly to seize this opportunity.
Right. He brought his incredible work ethic and focus on efficiency to the oil business.
Uh-huh.
And this is where the Standard Oil story truly takes off.
I'm ready to hear about it. Bring on the oil tycoon.
Rockefeller had an uncanny ability to spot inefficiencies and maximize profits. Remember his early days as a bookkeeper, learning about transportation costs.
And that ingrained frugality from his mother, willful waste makes woeful want.
Right. Exactly. That mindset was key to Standard Oil's success. He was obsessed with cutting costs and increasing output. For instance, most refineries at the time simply discarded the byproducts of kerosene refining, considering them waste.
Waste. Throwing away potential profit, that's surprising.
He saw value where others saw trash. He figured out how to use those byproducts to create additional products like gasoline tar, petroleum jelly, and lubricating oil.
So he's generating new revenue streams while competitors are literally tossing money away. Smart. Brilliant. And this is where his drive for control really took hold. He aimed to control every aspect of the oil business, from production to distribution.
That sounds like vertical integration,
Yeah.
which I've heard about. What does that mean exactly?
It means owning every stage of the process, from extracting the oil to selling it to customers. He wanted to own the pipelines, railroads, tank cars, everything. He even hired his own plumbers because he realized it was cheaper than outsourcing.
That's incredible attention to detail.
He was always anticipating the next move, staying ahead of the competition.
What about those competitors? How did they react to Rockefeller's growing dominance?
He was known for his aggressive tactics. He would offer to buy out competitors, and if they refused, well, let's say he was a tough negotiator.
I imagine things could get pretty intense.
He would leverage Standard Oil's size and efficiency to undercut prices, sometimes even selling at a loss to drive competitors out of business.
That's a risky move, selling at a loss.
He was playing the long game, and by the 1870s, Standard Oil was refining over 90% of U.S. oil.
That's a staggering level of control. Did that create problems for him?
It did. He faced accusations of being a monopolist, using unfair practices to crush rivals. The railroads in particular saw him as a threat.
Why the railroads? Weren't they essential for transporting oil?
They were, but Rockefeller was building his own pipelines, bypassing them. He also constantly demanded rebates and special deals on his shipments, further eroding their profits.
So was taking on the railroads, who were incredibly powerful at the time. That's bold.
It was a high-stakes gamble that led to a clash with Thomas A. Scott, the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, Standard Oil's main transporter.
This sounds like an epic battle. What happened?
Scott saw Rockefeller's pipeline ambitions as a direct threat to his business and retaliated by trying to compete directly with Standard Oil. Rockefeller, in turn, withheld his oil shipments, causing shortages that drove up prices and hurt the Pennsylvania Railroad. He even partnered with other railroads to start a price war.
So it was all-out war. Who came out on top?
Rockefeller, as you might expect, the Pennsylvania Railroad, was eventually forced to sell its oil interests to Standard Oil, giving him even more control over the industry.
So he won again, but all this fierce competition and these aggressive tactics probably didn't win him many friends.
You're right. By the late 1870s, public opinion began to turn against him, and newspapers started publishing critical articles about his business practices.
I imagine that was a difficult time for him.
He needed to find a way to protect his empire, and so he and his lawyers came up with a new legal strategy. In 1882, they created the Standard Oil Trust.
What was the purpose of the trust?
It consolidated all his holdings under a single entity controlled by a board of trustees. This was a clever legal maneuver designed to centralize power and make it much harder for the government to intervene.
It sounds like a way to circumvent regulations.
It was a controversial move, but it was effective, at least for a while. The Standard Oil Trust became the largest and most powerful corporation in the world.
But we know it couldn't last forever. The tide was turning against monopolies, and public pressure was mounting. What happened next?
That's where things get really interesting. Stay tuned, because the story of John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil is far from over.
Okay, so we've got Rockefeller at the helm of the world's most powerful corporation.
Right.
But facing a growing public backlash against monopolies.
Yeah.
What happens next?
Well, remember those investments he'd been making outside of oil?
Yeah.
He was buying iron ore mines, railroads,
Wow.
even partnering with Andrew Carnegie,
Oh, wow.
the steel magnate.
He was diversifying, building an even bigger empire.
Exactly. But those moves
Okay.
put him in direct conflict with other powerful figures,
Like who?
like J.P. Morgan,
That's
who
it.
was consolidating the steel industry.
A real clash of the titans.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And just as public sentiment against monopolies was reaching a boiling point,
Yeah.
a new threat emerged:
What's that?
investigative journalism. In 1904,
Right.
Ida Tarbell published a scathing expose
Wow.
titled The History of the Standard Oil Company.
Ida Tarbell, the famous muckraker.
Yeah.
She wasn't afraid to take on powerful interests.
She was a fearless and meticulous journalist, determined to expose the truth about Rockefeller's business practices.
Right?
Her writing,
Okay.
serialized in McClure's magazine, had a devastating impact on Standard Oil's public image.
What sorts of things did she reveal?
She detailed Standard Oil's ruthless tactics.
Okay.
The secret deals with railroads, price-fixing schemes,
Wow.
intimidation of competitors,
Really?
even personal scandals involving Rockefeller's family.
So not just business practices, but
Right.
personal attacks as well.
It was a full-blown media firestorm.
Oh, my goodness.
Rockefeller, who had always maintained a policy of silence
Okay.
with the press,
Yeah.
was now facing a public relations nightmare.
How did he respond to these accusations?
He mostly remained silent, hoping the scandal would fade away.
Yeah.
But the damage was done.
Oh, no.
Public opinion had turned against him, and the government was now determined to break up his monopoly.
This is where Teddy Roosevelt and his trust busting come into play, right?
Yes. Okay. Roosevelt, who became president in 1901, saw Standard Oil as the epitome of corporate greed
Wow.
and was determined to use the Sherman Antitrust Act to dismantle it.
So it was the U.S. government
Okay.
versus the world's most powerful corporation who won.
It was a long and complex legal battle than his stake in the original company.
Wow.
He became the world's first billionaire.
That's an interesting twist. He loses his company but ends up even wealthier.
It's a reminder that sometimes, even when it seems like the system is working against you,
Yeah.
it can still benefit those who hold immense wealth and power.
So what does he do with all that money?
He shifted his focus to philanthropy, becoming one of the most generous benefactors in history.
Wow.
He founded the Rockefeller Foundation,
Okay.
which has made significant contributions to education, health, and science.
That's great.
He also established the University of Chicago
Oh, wow.
and Rockefeller University.
It's like he was trying to use his fortune to make amends for the harm he caused.
It's possible. His motives were likely complex.
Yeah.
A mix of genuine altruism and a desire to improve his public image.
Sure.
But regardless of his reasons,
Yeah.
his philanthropic legacy is undeniable.
So looking back, how should we judge John D. Rockefeller?
That's a good question.
Hero or villain?
Yeah.
Ruthless businessman or visionary philanthropist?
It's a complicated question.
It is.
He was a product of his time, a man of contradictions.
Yeah.
He built an empire,
He did.
revolutionized the oil industry,
Yeah.
and then dedicated his later years to giving back.
Right.
It's up to each of us to decide how to weigh those different aspects of his life.
His story certainly gives us a lot to think about,
It does.
especially in our own time,
Right.
with the growing power and influence of large corporations and billionaires.
It reminds us that the pursuit of wealth and power can have both positive and negative consequences.
Yeah.
And it challenges us to think critically about the role of business in society
Right.
and the responsibility of those who hold great wealth.
Well, that's our deep dive on John D. Rockefeller.
Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for listening.